34 past the hour. Joining us now from Capitol Hill, Independent Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont. It is great to have you back on the show, sir.
Great to be with you.
Okay, so moving forward, what do you think would be the one or two areas where there is a possibility of working with the Trump administration?
The president, during his campaign, rightfully pointed out that we pay the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs, that the drug companies are ripping us off every single day, and that we should lower drug prices. I have introduced, and other people have introduced, very serious legislation that would take on the pharmaceutical industry, substantially lower prescription drug costs in the United States. President has talked about it. Mr. President, come on board. It is absurd that 1 out of 5 Americans cannot afford the medicine their doctors prescribe. That's area number one. Mika, the other area is the president, during his campaign, also rightfully pointed out that our infrastructure, our roads, our bridges, water systems, wastewater plants, rail system, etc., are crumbling. We can create, and I've introduced legislation to do this, over 13 million jobs with $1 trillion investment to rebuild our crumbling infrastructure. Now, if the president is prepared to come forward with a serious proposal, not one which is financed by huge tax breaks for Wall Street and the wealthy, I think that's an area that we can work together.
What about in the area of health care, Senator?
Well, you know, the president told us during the campaign that he was going to provide great health care to everybody. And he supported this Republican proposal, which was essentially a tax break for the top 2%, $300 billion, while throwing 24 million people off of health insurance, massive cuts in Medicaid, and raising premiums for seniors. If that's his idea of a great health care program, I don't see us working together in that area.
Mike Barnicle.
Senator, on health care, it seems both Democratic and Republican administrations, the Obama administration and now the Trump administration, focuses on what they can do to appease, it seems to me, the insurance industry. What can we do about what insurance companies do to our lives within the health care framework?
Hey, Mike, that's a question that's almost never asked on television. Congratulations. And here's the answer. And let's me just lay it right out there. There is one major country on earth that does not guarantee health care to all people as a right. It's the United States. And that country, our country, ends up spending almost double what the Canadians do, almost triple what the British do, far more than the French, Scandinavians do. Now, why is it that we spend far, far more and get less? Our health care outcomes in many respects are not as good as many of these other countries. Why is it? Well, Mike hit it right on, hit the nail on the head. It's, of course, the power of the insurance companies. For them, their goal is not to provide quality, cost-effective health care. It's to make as much money as they possibly can out of human suffering. Same thing for the drug companies. We have not had, and Mike is exactly right again. This is not just a Republican problem. It is a Democratic problem. Neither party has had the guts to stand up to the insurance companies and do what I think we need to do, and legislation that I will offer. A Medicare for all single-payer program. Medicare is a very popular program right now. It is a lifesaver when you get to 65. Let's expand it to everybody. We could save hundreds of billions of dollars in administrative costs, take on the drug companies. That is, Mike, in my view, the direction we have got to go. Yeah. Problem is, obviously, members of Congress, in many cases, don't have the guts to take them on.
Yeah, but Medicare's only worked for 50 years. We have to give it some more time to see if it really works.
Well, there you go.
All right, Rick Tyler.
Good morning, Senator Rick Tyler. I'm curious about Gorsuch. If the Democrats insist on cloture vote, some will call it a filibuster. I know that you've called it a cloture vote. That is the 60-vote threshold. Wouldn't you be forcing the Republicans to change the rules so that Gorsuch could be approved by minority only? And doesn't that set up the court for the next Supreme Court justice, who is likely to come off the court, who will be a liberal, to be placed by the conservatives? And won't that be the legacy of the Democrats?
Well, Rick, I wouldn't look at it exactly the way you do. I don't know that we're forcing anybody to do anything. Right now, as you know, the current rule is that it requires 60 votes for a Supreme Court nomination. Democrats changed the rules for a lot of lower-level appointments because of Republican obstructionism. But they left the Supreme Court at 60 because they believed, and I think correctly so, that you want some kind of bipartisanship for a guy or a woman who's going to get lifetime tenure on the most important court in this country. So I think I am going to vote against Gorsuch because I had a very pleasant and long discussion with him on all of the important issues facing this country. I don't think he's going to be voting in the right direction in terms of Citizens United, in terms of voter suppression, in terms of a woman's right to choose. I think his views are very, very, very right-wing. So I'm going to vote no, and I think it should take 60 votes for him to get the appointment.
So Senator Tom Perez, the chairman of the Democratic National Committee, is launching this overhaul of the entire DNC. It's requested resignation letters from all current staffers, and according to NBC News, staffers were told to expect this. Shortly after Perez took over as chairman in late February, an advisor to outgoing interim chair Donna Brazile reportedly asked all the employees to submit a resignation letter dated on April 15th. So one aide tells NBC that major organizational changes will be announced in the coming weeks. Does the DNC need a massive overhaul?
Absolutely. I supported Keith Ellison, and I think Keith understood that where the Democratic Party is today, programmatically, in terms of how it does business, has failed. I mean, the evidence is obvious. It's not just that we've lost the White House and the U.S. Senate and the U.S. House. We've lost some 900 legislative seats in the last 8 or 9 years. So clearly the Democratic Party needs a top-down overhaul. And that top-down overhaul means that instead of becoming dependent and being dependent on big money interest for campaign contributions, it has got to become a grassroots party. It has got to start speaking and acting and fighting for working people, for young people, people who want to transform this country. And by the way, I believe, and one of the reasons we were successful in defeating this disastrous Republican health care plan is that people at the grassroots are beginning to wake up and are prepared to fight back. Perez has got to capitalize that, and that's the kind of party I think the Democrats have to create.
Senator Sanders, I'm curious. You sought the Democratic nomination. You've weighed in on the Democratic Party. You've weighed in on a chair's race. Why not go in all the way and become a Democrat? Wouldn't you have more credibility of being a Democrat?
No, not necessarily, because number one, I was elected in Vermont as an independent. Number two, in Vermont, you cannot register as a Democrat. You get a ballot during the primary process. I always get the Democratic process. But let me just say this. The Democrats will not succeed unless it attracts many, many millions of independents. The number of people who are now moving in the independent direction as opposed to Republican and Democrat, it is growing. So if the Democrats are going to be successful, it, in fact, is going to have, that party is going to have to appeal to a whole lot of independents.
So, Senator, I asked a former DNC chair a couple of months ago if expanding the Democratic tent included expanding that tent to working class voters in, say, states like Kentucky who are pro-life. And is it should the DNC actually aggressively try to recruit candidates that line up culturally more with the areas where they want to win? Like, for instance, you were accused of being more pro-gun because you're from Vermont. I think you had a D- average, but that's actually a great point. That was considered a cardinal sin from the Democratic Party. I told this story a lot before, campaigning for a Republican in 1998 in Kentucky. I said, well, how radical are they on guns? Said, well, the NRA kind of likes them. How radical are they on pro-choice? Well, they're pro-life. And I looked at him and I said, well, buddy, you're screwed. You're going to lose, because this guy was a working class Democrat who believed in the sort of things that you believe in, but socially, he matched up with the community where he was running. Shouldn't Democrats be more accepting of that on the national level?
Well, Joe, let me answer it in this way. In my state, up in the northeast section of the state, it's pretty conservative.
Right.
And I do quite well, despite the fact that I am pro-choice, I am pro-gay rights, I am very strongly pro-environment. I think that the issue that millions of Americans, and by the way, I don't concede this red state, blue state. I don't believe it. I've been to West Virginia. You got decent people there. Decent people who are working longer hours for lower wages if they're lucky enough to have jobs. They can't afford to send their kids to college.
Right.
They don't have health care. I think those are the issues that the Democratic Party has got to stand up for. And not only stand up for workers, they got to have the guts to take on Wall Street. And as Mike pointed out, the insurance companies and the drug companies. And when we do those things, I think good things happen.
Well, see, Bernie, that's a perfect example. West Virginia is a state Democrats used to win. West Virginia is a state Democrats should win if you look at the economic policies. But there is this massive cultural divide that allows Donald Trump to win by 45%. That's what I'm saying. I'm not asking for any litmus test, but can the Democratic Party be more open to candidates that may not be rigidly pro-choice, may not be rigidly pro-gun control?
The answer is, Joe, the answer I think is yes, but the point is in states like West Virginia and throughout the South is the poorest part of our country. You got high unemployment in African-American areas. You got enormous despair in white working class areas. What the Democrats have got to do is come into those states and not be Republican-like, but have the guts to take on the big money interest. If they do that, I think other things will fall into place. I believe that strongly.
Yeah.
All right, President Trump, senators rolling back Obama-era climate regulations with his latest executive orders. The latest move calls on the EPA to initiate a review of the Clean Power Plan, which sought to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. The order also scraps regulations that make it tougher to mine coal on federal lands, which the president touted as a campaign promise cap. Take a listen.
My administration is putting an end to the war on coal. Going to have clean coal, really clean coal. With today's executive action, I am taking historic steps to lift the restrictions on American energy, to reverse government intrusion, and to cancel job-killing regulations.
Senator, where do you want to begin with that?
Right. Amiga, that's a 6-hour discussion. It is, I don't know what adjective to use. You have a president who tells the world that in his view, after intensive study, he has concluded, unlike the rest of the scientific community, that climate change is a hoax emanating from China. And what he has done in appointing the people that he has appointed is a danger, a horrific danger, not only to our generation, but to our children and our grandchildren. Hey, Mr. President, listen to the scientists. Climate change is real. It is already causing devastating problems in our country and around the world. And if we don't transform our energy system away from fossil fuel, coal, oil, gas, into energy efficiency and sustainable energy, I worry very much about the planet the future generations will inherit. And by the way, despite Trump's rhetoric there, the corporate world understands that the future is sustainable energy. Most of the new investments are going into solar, which is exploding all over our country and all over the world, and into wind. What this guy is doing is really an international embarrassment and endangering the future of our country. And I will, along with many of my colleagues, do everything that we can to move this country in a very, very different direction than Trump is proposing.
So the Financial Times, Mike Barnacle just pointed out to us, actually has a headline here that says ExxonMobil actually is calling on Trump to stick with the Paris Climate Accord.
I mean, how crazy could it be that the largest oil company in this country understands more than the President of the United States? That is, to say that Trump's position is pathetic would be to understate where he is coming from.
All right. Senator Bernie Sanders, don't hold back. Thank you.
Thank you, Bernie.
Much. You never
always,
do, and that's why we love you.
It's always great talking to you.
Thank you very much.
And you heard Senator Sanders just name sky-high prescription drug prices as one of the issues he might be able to work with the president on. Ahead, we're going to dig deeper into that very issue. We're going to bring in the CEO, who was at the center of that heated congressional hearing over the price of her company's product, the EpiPen. pen. That's ahead on Morning Joe.